Hello and welcome to our final session of the Intellectual Property and Patents How to Protect Your Idea course with David Postolski. My name is Kasia Whites, and once again I'll be your moderator. And just a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and you will receive the link to the recording and to the slides in a follow-up email later today, so you can review the webinar at your convenience. And also, I know that in the previous two sessions you were great. There was a lot of engagement. There was a lot of questions being posted, and David has been trying to answer these questions, as many of them as he could. And please do keep them coming. We are taking note of every question, and we'll try to have a little bit extended Q&A session at the end of the webinar today. So if you can stay on for an extra 15-20 minutes, if there is still questions at the end, then we'll extend the time a little bit to make sure that we answer as many of them as we can. So that's all from me. Now, David, off to you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Some of you have reached out personally, and that's great. And some of you, it might be your first time. There's my email if you have any further questions that kind of go off of this. This is going to be a pretty intense next 2 hours because we're going to really get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what you need to get a patent. We've talked about like funding, and we've talked about NDAs, and we've talked about how to protect your idea. We talked about the different forms of intellectual property, but now we're going to talk a lot about how to actually get that patent. We have two of those surveys again. Actually, just realized I probably should have asked everyone a question about the homework that you got. So if anyone did a patent search, maybe you can just, at the end or during the session, just shoot a question to Kasia and let me know if you have any questions there. We gave you the slides on how to do a patent search. We wanted to see what you came out on, and if you have any questions, a lot of what we covered today will uncover that. But we do want to take those two polls. For some of you, you may have done this already, but for some of the new attendees, if we have any, we want to see if you can answer these two questions. So Kasia's going to do the poll, and then we'll start the webinar.
So I just launched the first poll. Did you attend last week's session? If you can just click on the answer there on the screen, we'll give you a minute maybe to answer. And the answers keep coming in. That's an easy yes/no question.
What was the first question again? Oh, if you attended last time, right?
Yes. So we have, all right, I'm going to close the poll now, and we have the results. Results are 83% yes, 17% no.
Great. So we have some new attendees. Very cool.
And I'm going to launch the second poll now. How would you characterize yourself? We are still collecting the answers.
Good.
All right, I think the answers slowed down now, so I'm closing the poll, and here are the results. David, can you see the results, or do you want me to read them?
Can you read them?
Okay, yeah, sure. Sure. How would you characterize yourself? Inventor, I have a great idea, 30%. Entrepreneur, I need resources to protect my product or service, 48%. Company, my company wants to protect our ideas, 22%, and the student and attorney both at 0. So we have the once again the entrepreneur is the biggest share here for 48%.
Great, and we were hoping that. So just for the few of you that are new, my name is David Postolski, and also for those of you who may have missed my background, I've been an intellectual property and patent attorney for over close to 17 years now. And I started my career at pretty large law firms and then a large company. And about 10 years ago, I realized I wanted to dedicate my life to entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial way. So I joined an entrepreneurial firm. I'm a partner here for the last 4 years at a firm called Gerhardt Law in New York, New Jersey, and Philly. And we basically take a lot of the risk and share in a lot of the reward that you all deal with every day as entrepreneurs. So, what does that mean for an IP attorney to be an entrepreneur? Well, it's having the foresight to really take the extra step in helping a person protect their innovations and/or brand and/or creative works. But sometimes entrepreneurs don't have money, and or they're looking for funding, or they have to strategically place themselves in a way to make them more kind of investable. And so we help you kind of with that. We don't just look at this as a journey to get your intellectual property, but to help grow and incubate your business in any way that we can, and all that doesn't cost money. It's been very rewarding and very, very, very fun, and happy to be here on this third session. We will have a separate session, hopefully in the future, all about trademarks and copyrights, because there were a lot of questions. We got all of your questions from last week, so we're going to go over them at the end. For those of you who came to part 1 and 2, thank you. For those of you who are finishing out this with us, thank you so much. We'd love, love, love to hear your feedback on the session. Hopefully, maybe Kasha can talk a little bit about that at the end, on how you can do that. I think Co-Founders Lab would love to know how it went, and if you like this model of live presentations, that's something we'd want to know too. And yeah, so if you need to get in touch with me, there's my email. I'm local to New York City, so if you want to meet, we can do that too. Okay, we are going to go straight into the slides. I'm taking myself off of camera so you can focus on the slides. I'll be back later to answer some questions, but I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to actually get a patent. There's actually 5 thresholds to get a patent, and these are the 5 things that you must have in order to get a patent. And so on the screen in front of you, you'll see novelty, obviousness, written description, enablement, and best mode. Those are the 5 things. Publication, allowance, and issuance we'll talk about in a second, because we're also going to talk about what happens after you file a patent, like what's the process, how long do you have to wait, what are you expecting, what are you paying for. But I'm going to start and work my way up from best mode. So the reason why you use a patent attorney, if you remember from the first 2 sessions, is that it's a legal document that has a lot of technical information in there, because that technical information will describe your invention in technical detail and provide the blueprint by which your patent will be judged against others when you want to stop someone else from doing what you're doing or infringing what you're doing. So if you have the technical description of your patent, then clearly you'll be able to say, hey, infringing product or infringing service or infringing software, your product, your design, whatever you think is infringing you, meets all the requirements of my patent. It matches my technical description. And so that goes directly, by the way, sorry for the coughing, the allergies today are out of control here in New York City, in New Jersey also. I'll try to keep it under. But so having that technical description becomes key to making sure that you satisfy the first, what we call formality requirement of getting a patent, and that is the best mode requirement. Clearly, if your invention requires a specific material, or your program has a specific instruction that needs to be done, or specific material that needs to be used, or something that whatever it is that gives you that competitive edge, that has to be in the application under best mode. What is the best way of making the product, the best way of programming the product, the best way of designing the product. You can't leave anything out. Remember, a patent is the opposite of a trade secret. You are disclosing everything to the government, everything to your patent attorney, so they can then disclose it to the patent office in order for you to get protection on the best way of practicing your invention. So very, very, very important that you don't leave anything out. So pretty easy to do, right? It's you just have to make sure that you tell your patent attorney everything there is to know about your invention and put the best way of practicing. And it makes sense, because if you include the best way of practicing your invention and you don't leave anything out, then when somebody goes to infringe your product, or somebody has, or you've come to know of an infringing product in the marketplace, and it matches your description, then clearly your description should have the best way of making it or designing it or whatever, so that you're able to then enforce that against the person that's infringing it. Very easy to do. The first 3 requirements are formalities and very easy to do. If you don't do them in your application, you will get a rejection, and you may not have the opportunity to add anything. Remember, when you file a non-provisional in the United States, you cannot change it. So if you get a best mode requirement rejection, meaning if the examiner thinks that you left something out, maybe by the way you described it or something, you can't then later add it back in, because adding it back in would mean that you're changing it. Adding it back in would mean that you're inventing it on the date that you added it. And remember, the whole point about patents is that you have that earliest filing date. How do you get that earliest filing date? Well, you have the earliest invention date by filing your application with all the details, all the best ways of practicing that invention or making that invention or building that invention. All of that should be in the earliest filing date that you have. So let's say if you have it in a provisional, let's say you leave out the best, let's say rubber is the best way to practice your whatever your product is, and you leave out rubber in your provisional, and then you convert it to a non-provisional, and you still leave out rubber, thinking that that's the part that you're going to hold back because that's going to be the competitive edge, or that's going to be the trade secret, or whatever maybe you don't know, and you're trying to be cute and you want to leave out some stuff. But clearly, if the examiner reads it and says, well, in the way you're describing this and the temperatures you're using, or if you're using electricity, rubber would be the optimal material, and you didn't disclose rubber in your provisional, you didn't disclose rubber in your non-provisional, we're going to give you a rejection based on the fact that you have no best mode. And then when you go to respond to that rejection and try to add rubber, he's going to say, sorry, new matter, you can't invent it now, you had 2 chances to do this. Your patent is, you don't have to refile your entire patent again. That sucks. So very easy to do, best mode. Second one, enablement requirement. The enablement requirement, in other words, means that by its written description and by its drawings, or by the drawings in the design, your patent, when read by the patent office, when read by a patent examiner, remember, who may not be an attorney, likely is not. 2% of U.S. patent examiners are not are attorneys, so 98% of them are what we call agents. When read by them, and again, they'll be skilled in a particular science or technology or whatever your patent is involved, they have to read it and look at the drawings and understand it, and the science or the technology has to make sense. Right? If you're describing, I think I used this in session 1 when I introduced this concept. When you're describing a pump that carries water from one place to another, clearly you need some type of conduit so that water can travel to another location. Right? So pump will pump up the water and travel to another location. If your drawings don't show a pipe, or you did not describe it in some way, then you have missed the enablement requirement. The examiner who's skilled in this science is going to read it and say, hang on a second, this doesn't even work, right? If you are describing a particular technology solution and you didn't describe the fact that there's a computer system with memory and that there are algorithms, and that there's a server and a cloud, and information flows through here, or pipe flows through a water. If you leave out pieces that do not make the invention able, that do not enable the invention, it just can't be built or used or designed the way that you said you will, then it will be rejected under the enablement requirement. And again, you will not be allowed to fill in the blanks. That's why it's so important that your provisional is written so well, right? Because when you go to convert it to a non-provisional, one, you want to make sure that you're not reinventing things so that you lose the earlier date that you filed your provisional. But two, you want to make sure that when you convert it, that it's fully enabled. Because we have been involved in situations where clients will have like the napkin patent, where they'll put 3 paragraphs on a piece of paper, have a provisional, and when they go to file the non-provisional, they don't use attorneys. They go to file the non-provisional, they add in a claim. So they were talking about a 2-page application. The examiner will look at it and he'll be like, great, I understand your invention, but it doesn't work. Like, where are the physical components? Like, where is the computer system that this technology solution exists in? And he'll say, sorry, best mode rejection, you didn't satisfy enablement, I'm going to reject the patent. You should have blown it out in technical detail. So again, not hard to do. These first 3 are not hard to do. If you have a really good technical patent attorney, they will be able to describe in great specificity and detail how your system should work, how it could work, and how it will work in the future. All of that should be in there as part of enablement. The third kind of makes sense in which is the written description requirement, makes sense in light of the enablement and best mode requirement, also a formality. Your patent has to satisfy the description of having everything, all the bells and the whistles, right? So if you have drawings, the drawings have to be labeled, you have to point out particular pieces, they have to have reference numerals describing what each piece is. Is there a distal end, a proximal end, you know, the formulation and how many carbons or hydrogens, you know, how does information flow from a user to a back end? You know, is there an application interface? Is a graphical interface? All of that has to be in there. And so, again, really easy to do. It's like you want to err on the side of being completely specific and technical. Don't err on the side of, oh, I think, oh, the patent office will just know that, right? Or the examiner will just know that. More and more, it's the patent office's duty to grant patents. It's not to not grant patents. It is definitely the patent office's duty, the Department of Commerce duty to grant patents. But the patents that they grant have to be specific with specificity to point out the invention, to describe the invention, and to make sure that whatever they are granting as a legal document will then, because they know those documents are going to be, you know, pulled into court, and they're going to be examined, and they're going to be re-examined, and, you know, people can try to, you know, invalidate it. So it's their duty to make sure that they require all of these different requirements to make sure that your patent is with specificity. And hopefully you're working with an attorney that is skilled in that particular technology, or someone at his firm is, and they're helping you along. Because most of the time, most entrepreneurs may not be skilled in the invention that they're doing, right? A homemaker who comes up with a app doesn't know how to program, or, you know, the mechanical engineer who comes up, you know, who is an inventor on, I don't know, some, you know, biopharmaceutical, but, you know, but is using his skills as a mechanical engineer to create the device around the formulation, or create the delivery method that's going to administer the formulation. So most of the time, entrepreneurs may not be skilled, so it's important that your attorney is skilled, because his skilled written description is going to be read by a patent examiner with the same skill. And so make sure that your specification has all these bells and whistles and will not be rejected. Because again, you can't change anything, especially if it's a remember, we're talking about examination here, so provisionals aren't examined. This is all about the non-provisional. This is all about the conversion, that application that you convert into a non-provisional. That's the one that's examined. That's the one that matures into a patent. That's the one that the patent office will say you cannot change anymore. You can't add anything. Can't add a drawing because the examiner believes you left something out. You'll have to file an entirely new application, or file something called a continuation in part application, where you're basically telling the patent office, okay, I screwed up, I left something out by accident or intentionally, I didn't need to do it or whatever, but now the only way you can do is continue from your original application and add something. That's the in part of it, continuation in part. So I'm going to continue from my parent application. I'm going to file a child application or continuation application, and the in part, the part that I'm going to add is going to be the addition that meets these requirements that I didn't put in my other application. The problem is that might be a good option. The problem is that new application gets a new filing date, thus a new invention date. So all the old stuff will get the original, provisional or non-provisional date, but the new stuff that goes to satisfying these requirements gets the in-part date and the day that you file, which could be like 2 years later, right? Because some of these applications are not being examined for like 14 to 18 months after you originally file. It's a long time to have a new invention date. Anything could have happened. Anyone could have filed before you within those 18 months. So those three things, very easy. Enablement, written description, best mode, very easy to satisfy. What we call formalities, the top two, novelty and obviousness. This is where you these are what we call these are what we call legal formalities, and really some of them are hard to accomplish. Some of them are easier to overcome, but both of them have to be satisfied. So let's take novelty first, because that's kind of the easiest one to always explain. So this is why you do a search. Remember, this is why I asked you all to do a search, because the first thing you ever want to do is find out if your invention is truly novel. And you do that by doing a search, right? If you do a Google search, and you do a Google patent search, and you do a USPTO.gov search, and you're able to find out what is novel about your invention in light of what is already out there, then your patent attorney can help you with great specificity focus on the novelty of your invention. It could be a design. The actual novelty could be a design. It could be a feature of something. It could be an improvement on something. Novelty is actually three things. It means you created something, you discovered something, you were the first one to discover something, or it means you've taken something that you already know, like that example where I say you read a patent and then you add 3 paragraphs because that's your improvement, and those 3 paragraphs, that's your novelty. So the improvement on something is also novelty, but it's also finding a new use for something. So, I always use the wheel example. I discovered the wheel, I made it a super wheel because I improved it, and I used the wheel and I make it a record player. So finding a new use for something is the same thing as discovering something. It's novelty. And really, so the search really hones in on what that is. And we're going to talk about the anatomy of what a patent application looks like, and you'll understand why it's so important to do the search in regards to novelty. But that too, in my mind, is also easy, right? If you get a rejection based on novelty, and the Code of Federal Regulations is what we call the 102 section. If you get a rejection from an examiner that says, hey, wait a second, I read your application, and I found a patent that reads on or is similar to your patent, so I'm going to reject it based on this 102 section of the Code of Federal Regulations that describes novelty, that somewhere in the world somebody has invented what you've invented. That's his opinion, right? So he can do that, right? And now hopefully this wouldn't come as a surprise to you, right? Because hopefully you and your patent attorney have done a good patent search and you've anticipated this rejection. But let's say you didn't. Let's say maybe you did the patent search, maybe he didn't find it, maybe it's a new rejection, maybe it's a new piece of art or a new reference or a new patent that has come up in the last 18 months. It's at this point where you have to argue. That's really why I think you need a patent attorney. You have to argue that your patent is actually distinct and novel over what the patent examiner thinks he believes is not. And the only way to really do that, there's 2 ways to do that, actually. The only 2 ways to do that is to argue, right? Basically provide arguments saying, no, that patent solves that problem, my patent solves this problem, and I don't think it's the same. Or you can amend. It's the only time that you can amend your claims. And claims are the only thing that you can amend, right? So remember the anatomy of a patent application. There's the abstract, which is a 150-word description. There's the drawings, which are the black and white illustrations. There's the specification, the detailed description, where you satisfy written description and enablement in best mode. And also includes the background section where you put your search results in, where you say, we found 20 patents that are similar, and this is what they solve, but here's why there's still a need for solving my problem, and here's my here's my invention. But it also includes the fourth section, the most important section, the claims, right? And so the claims are so important because they not only describe how broad or how limiting your invention is, but it's the only piece of the patent that you can change or amend in light of getting either a novelty or an obviousness rejection, right? So if the examiner thinks that there is a patent from a year ago that teaches the same thing as you, what he's basically saying is, I read your claims, doesn't care about anything else at this point, I read your claims, and your claim 1 says 3 things, has 3 elements, 3 limitations, 3 descriptions, right? And those 3 descriptions, in my opinion, as an examiner, I believe they read exactly the way this patent describes their invention, this earlier, the patent that was filed a year ago. And so when we get a rejection like that, so again, we can argue, but one of the ways, not easier, one of the ways we do it, because sometimes we do both methods, is to say, okay, examiner, fine, we'll amend our claim to say this. And as long as what you are amending is actually in your application, in your detailed description, you can then amend it to. Again, another major reason why you need a lot of information in your application, because it's like playing poker. If you have the information and you have the words that are supported in the detailed description, then it will allow you to amend the claims in this type of situation. So if you amend one of those 3 limitations to say something else that is not taught in the application or the patent that the examiner cited, bingo, you have overcome his rejection, right? It makes sense, right? Your claims do not teach anymore because you've amended them what he believes is taught by the other patent, and thus it's not the earlier patent doesn't anticipate your patent. Done. 102 rejection obviated or overcome. And then of course we ask them to withhold it. Now so listen, I'm making it easier said than done. Many times if you don't have the words, then you can't change the language. But sometimes what you can do is, instead of changing words and playing a game of semantics, you can cancel the whole claim and rewrite a claim with that patent in mind, with that earlier patent in mind, but also supported by your original specification, and maybe geared to a different feature, right? Maybe you realize, okay, you know what, that patent really does teach what I'm trying to do, or should teach one aspect of my product. I'm going to go after something else, and so I'm going to draft all new claims. So this game of semantics and changing and amending and wording is something that's a very, very big reality to get over the 102 rejection. But again, it's so important that you have the words to play with. If you don't have the words to play with, then you might not be able to change or to amend the claims in your favor. And again, with every amendment, your invention is further defined, right? So if you are potentially limiting your invention by amending your claims in order to get over another patent, then that might be something that will haunt you later on, right? If later on you find out that the infringing product that you want to go after, or you think there's a competitor out there that you want to strategically partner with, and you're going to ask them if you want to take a license from me, and they say, you know what, we read your patent and you really limit your claims are so limiting that we really don't overlap with you, so we're not going to do business with you. That could potentially be a deal breaker. So it's definitely an art to amending. And wherever we can, we try not to amend, because when we draft claims, we are always, as patent attorneys, drafting them with the broadest protection possible. we are starting really broad strokes. We want as much protection as we can, and it's the patent office's job to make sure that those, not that those broad claims, that claims, that allowed claims, the claims that become patents, are describe the invention and only the invention, nothing more or nothing less. And so there's always this push and pull. We're trying to, you know, broadly describe things in broad claims. The patent office is trying to, you know, limit. You know, it's this push and pull. So when they may cite something against us that we may then have to limit, that may destroy the broadness of our client's invention. But if we can result in some type of protection that still will stand up in the commercial world, then we're happy. So that's novelty. And you know, so yeah, I often I'm often asked, well, what happens if, you know, you don't get that the patent office doesn't find anything that's similar? Well, great. Well, one, that's validation that we did a great search, found nothing, and, you know, counsels our clients to file their inventions. But if they do find something, it's not the end of the world, right? Because, you know, any one technology, any one product, any one design has thousands of patents out there. And so it's really important that you understand what the limits of your protection are, and as well as the broadness of yours. But that's what you get. That's what your claim should be directed to. That's what will describe your invention. The last threshold is obviousness. And since 2004, we have this is kind of the bane of every patent attorney's existence, is getting an obviousness rejection. It's almost worse than getting a novelty rejection. So obvious basically the definition of obviousness is obvious, right? It's almost obvious what obvious means, right? It means that that your invention could be assumed by the patent office to have already existed in the prior art or the prior patents by virtue of the fact that it is nothing more than a mere combination of things that are already out there, right? So I'll give you an example. So I had this is a real story. So I had a client that had a supercharging windmill system. So basically what my client would do, he would supercharge oil, which is basically bringing oil up from the ground, and that's not all he would do. He would then take the oil, and it would be further pumped all the way up into a windmill, and it would spin. The oil would spin a turbine, and the turbine would create energy, right? It would create. And this was another way to use oil, and it was and so we had the system. And so we didn't get a novelty rejection, but we got an obviousness rejection because the examiner said like this: well, you know, the idea of bringing oil up from the ground and through pipes, there's patents on that. And he cited 1 or 2 patents from like 1960 or something like that. Windmills have also been around, and he cited, you know, a bunch of windmill patents from like the 80s or something like that. And then he also cited turbines, like the idea that a turbine could be powered by, you know, water or, you know, oil or something like that. And he cited another patent. He said, if you put together these 3 patents from the 60s, from the 80s, and from I think the last one was from 2000, well, those 3 inventors, if they got together and they combined their inventions, that's your client's invention. And, you know, it's almost like cockamamie to repeat, but this is the patent office's way of trying to get or trying to have an entrepreneur, trying to have a company commercialize their inventions. And it's a big statement, and I'll explain it in a second. So one, everything in this world is a combination of everything, right? What he did to us, combining a windmill patent and a turbine patent and a pipe patent, like an oil pipe patent, that's something that you can do with any invention, right? I mean, we just said before, novelty is the improvements of other inventions. So clearly, if we're improving something, the examiner can say, well, you took this one, and it's only obvious that you would improve it. Well, no, that's not what obvious is. It would be that it has to be a combination of other inventions. So, but still, the rational mind can probably take apart anything and say, well, it's just the combination of everything that's come before it. And so this is the government's way of ensuring what the whole purpose of patents was about. If you remember, the Department of Commerce is who runs the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Their sole goal in creating our patent system was to make sure that innovation was pushed forward, that we had a system where entrepreneurs can share their ideas, in exchange get a monopoly for 20 years for a limited time in order for other people to learn from those inventions, improve those inventions, and thus further innovation, further industrialization. Right? We wouldn't get to the LED light if it wasn't for the light bulb. And so what was happening though up until 2004 was that many people were filing patents on inventions, maybe commercializing them or not, maybe just getting a patent and then trying to license it, never commercializing it, never proving the concept. And we found ourselves in this state of innovation where really nothing was being pushed forward because nothing was really being commercialized. Right? The whole point about patents is not just about creating innovation, but how can innovation be adopted if it's not commercialized? And so they try to create a system by which if we can incentivize an entrepreneur to commercialize their invention, then that commercial success will be one of the ways to defeat a rejection based on obviousness. So if my client was able to prove that he actually sold his supercharging windmill turbine system in the marketplace, and he was able to take that data, take that proof of commercial success, and show it to the examiner and say, hey, examiner, one, those three things that you put together, I'm the first one to do it. And I can prove that by showing you that up until this point, this did not exist, the fact that you can combine all three of these things. And so I not only created it, but people bought it. And so if you can prove commercial success of your product, and you can prove that you are making a dent in the industry or market share, or that your company has turned from red to black, there's no magic number of units sold or magic number of money made. But if you can prove commercial success, then that data can go to defeat a claim, an examiner's contention of obviousness. So in a way, it's the government's way of saying, okay, show me the commercialization of this. What's going on with this, right? This whole point was that you were getting this to push innovation forward. So where is it? Like, so show me how that's working. And again, it could be, maybe you got into a licensing deal, or you sold 10, or you operated in the red, and now you're operating in the black. It is one way to defeat obviousness. It's not the only way. We'll talk about other ways in a second, but it's a great way. And you would have to do this at around the 2-year mark, right? So in about 18 months after you file your non-provisional, you will get examined, and if you get this obviousness rejection, you will have to prove this in around 18 months to maybe about a year, because you could extend it and stuff like that. So that's one way to do it. And I kind of understand the government's rationale for doing this and for making this happen, because the old days of just getting a patent and then having a company license it, those days don't exist anymore. Really, I mean, there are the anomaly story every now and then, but really it's about the company that wants to partner with you or license from you, that your actual business, right? That you've made it, and that you have market validation and traction, and that you have some commercial success, even if it's mediocre or minor. You have something. That's when a company wants to do business with you, or that's when they tend to do business with you. This is the government. This is the patent office's way of making sure that happened, and that patents were not just sitting on shelves. There are two other ways to defeat obviousness, because again, things are a combination. The examiner will likely find combinations of your invention out there, and of course, when we do the patent search, we're also looking for that. When we do a patent search, we're not just looking for novelty, we're looking for obviousness. We're looking for those pieces together. We're looking for the things that you can piece together to form your invention. And so the other way is called long felt need. So if you can prove that your invention, despite all the other past inventions that the examiner cited against you, you can prove that your invention still, that despite all the other applications that the examiner cited against you, if you can prove that your invention still solved a long felt need in a particular industry, then that is another way of getting over the obviousness rejection, right? Because if you can say to the examiner, hey, you know, I have a declaration from somebody that has been in, let's say, the assistive technologies. Let's say this is a device for the blind, right? Maybe it's like a super cane or something like that. If you're able to get declarations from like the Lighthouse Society, or you know, people that are blind even, or something, saying, you know, there's all these inventions out there, and until this product came along, there was still this problem. There was still this need to really solve, you know, how to navigate through a city street with a, you know, sonar device on a cane, like that. And so up until I created this, or up until this product came out, there was still that problem. And so that's one that's another way to do it. Much harder way to do it, because you have to find who is that interested person, who is going to be persuasive enough to the examiner to prove long felt need, but not impossible, and definitely something that we try to use. The third one is what we call teaching away, right? So sometimes the examiner will use like cockamamie inventions as a combination to form yours, things that have nothing to do with what you are trying to protect, patents that have solved other problems. And so if you're able to convince an examiner through argument, saying, hey, you know, you piece together three things, or two things even, that you think that my client's invention is an obvious variation of those two things. Well, I'm here to tell you that the first of the two that you cited against me solves something totally different. It's a totally different field of endeavor. That inventor was trying to solve something totally different, and so was the second one. And so, no, it's not obvious to combine these two. It's ridiculous to combine these two. And so sometimes that is the surest way to get over a rejection like this, is to provide persuasive argument, right? And so it's good to have a lawyer to provide persuasive arguments. And then the fourth one would be to amend the claims, right? So if you can amend the claim slightly, maybe because of novelty, maybe not because of novelty, then, you know, logic says, well, if my claim doesn't say what the examiner thinks it says, then he's not going to find the patent that corresponds with that claim, and then use that patent as one of the references that he combines with another patent to say my patent's obvious. So that's another way to do it. Regardless, these are the 5 thresholds to patentability. When we set out to file a patent application, you're always looking to satisfy these 5 things. The rejections that you get from an examiner at the 18-month period after your application is published will be geared to this. You'll either get a 102 rejection, which is a novelty rejection. You'll get a 103 rejection, again, the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 103, which is an obviousness rejection, or you will get a 101 rejection, so 101, 102, 103, which is enablement, best mode, and written description. And overcoming those is everything. I mean, if you can't overcome them, then you might be forced to, you know, either file a brand new application, or file a continuation in part, or amend your claims that are going to make it much more limiting, and you end up with no protection. So this is everything. So again, when you file your application, this will happen at the 18-month period, and you will get first you'll be published, which means now anybody that's doing a patent search on Google Patents or on uspto.gov will actually get to see your patent, and so hopefully they won't file knowing that you're already out there. But it also marks the period that the application is now assigned to an examiner at the patent office. It becomes on their docket. It becomes part of their responsibility. It gets sent to their, you know, art unit, their scientific unit. And if it's technology, it goes to a technologist. If it's chemical, it goes to a chemist in the patent office. And they will read it for the first time. They will focus on those claims, not much of anything else. And they will do their search. Usually it's a keyword search. Sometimes it's a classification search, which hopefully you know what that means now, where they're searching not just the keywords of, you know, if you're doing like augmented reality, they're not just searching augmented reality, but they're searching, you know, maybe it's augmented reality for the blind, and so they're getting a little bit more detailed in there. Maybe they're looking at other types of devices or programming or technologies related to, you know, aiding people with disabilities, not just, you know, the blind. It could be something else. Maybe it's a much more directed classification search. So it will be, they'll get it for the first time. They'll do their review. They will also do a search, and they will issue an official action, and it will be based on these 5 things. And if you will have 2 chances to with your patent attorney to get over these rejections. And so when you pay your filing fee, that $400 filing fee, if you're a micro entity, you get 2 bites of the apple. You get 2 examination tries. So that first examination will be one of these 5 things. And if you don't get an examination, meaning they just say, you know what, we did a search and we found nothing, well, that's kind of suspect. It's not. We used to think that was like the holy grail, but it's really not. You want to be on record that you are truly novel and non-obvious, and truly have been looked at by the patent office, and potentially have had to put some arguments on there that you are novel in light of something else. There's like absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's great, right? That's preserving a great record for you. Sometimes not having an examination means maybe a lazy examiner, you know, maybe they searched wrong, maybe they didn't really understand the invention, maybe whatever. It could be a bunch of things. But most 90% of the time, they're issuing a first official action based on these 5 things. And if your patent attorney can succeed to overcome these rejections, then you will proceed to allowance, right? An allowance is what we all want as patent attorneys. It is the period in the examination process that signifies to you as the inventor and your patent attorney that everything you have written has been fully examined. All the claims that you have amended or changed or whatever have been accepted, and the only thing you have to do is pay a fee, basically a printing fee, a publication fee, an issue fee, and then your patent will be sent to a printer, and it will, you know, put on nice paper with a nice ribbon, and all's great. And it'll take about 4 months to do this. And in that 4 months, we as patent attorneys, we always have to make sure during that time that everything is in order. So not just, we know the examination's order because we just came off of that, but like ownership. Like let's say you want the patent to be assigned to a company. This is the time to do it, right? Let's say you want, let's say you are missing a document. Like let's say because it used to be that the patent office would require an inventor to sign a declaration that they were the true inventor upon filing the application. And believe me, that's what most firms do up front. But sometimes, you know, there are situations where maybe the inventor didn't sign, or maybe the patent attorney didn't send them the paperwork, or maybe another inventor was added, or maybe there's a new owner or something. All of that, all the chain of title, all the declarations, everything has to be on file before you pay that printing fee, that issue fee. Very, very important. Because if you don't, then it might potentially be grounds for filing a reissue of your application, right? Because when you actually go to license your patent, if the ownership or the documentation is not in order, then you potentially leave that open as a reason for invalidating your patent, right? So if somebody wants to make a big deal about it, maybe an infringer or someone that's an investor or somebody saying, hey, you know what? There are 2 inventors on this, only one of them signed. We're not going to give you any money if you don't get that second inventor to not only be on record saying that he invented it, but that that he's going to assign it to the company that I'm about to invest in. So all of that has to be worked out before you actually pay the fee, pay the issue fee, before the patent is printed. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it can cause some problems. And so you then pay your issue fee, you get your printed patent, about 30 days before you get your printed patent, you get an issue notification saying what your patent number is and saying what your grant date is. And then you get your printed patent 30 days later, and then hopefully that will be around the 3-year mark from the time that you filed, and you have your patent. And it's not the end of the story, it's just the beginning of it, right? So you have to pay maintenance fees or taxes, right? So in the 4th year, the 8th year, and the 12th year of your 20-year term, remember your 20 years is starting from your filing date. That's why it's so important, your earliest filing date. If it was your provisional, it's 20 years from that. If it's your non-provisional, it's 20 years from that. If it's from an international application, it's 20 years from your international filing date. And so you within the 4th year, 8th year, the 12th year of that 20-year period, you're basically paying a tax to the United States government, saying, hey, you're keeping this on record for us. You know, you're reminding us of these due dates, and so we're going to pay you a fee. It's like, I think the first one's like $700, the second one's like $1,000, the third one's like $3,000, and then, you know, the last 8 years you don't pay anything. So you have your patent for 20 years, and some people ask me, well, can you renew it? Well, no, but another key important date that you have to realize is when you find out what your official grant date will be, what your official issuance date of your patent will be, which will be different from your filing date, probably 3 years later, you will have until that date, only until that date, to file any sort of extending protection. So let's say, if you remember, when you draft an application with your patent attorney, you're going to have multiple, you're going to have not multiple inventions, well, you may have multiple inventions, but multiple embodiments or multiple versions, or how it's going to work 5 years from now, or, you know, or a workaround, or a different product design, or a different feature. Remember, we are a unitary patent system. It's one invention per patent. So if you want to now go after a different invention or a different embodiment or a different idea in that patent, you will have until the patent date, the issue date, the grant date of your original patent to file what we call a continuation application. So before I talked about a continuation in part application, that was when you have to add something new. But if the information's already in there, and now you just want to draft new claims, just claims, based on the original description that you provided, that has to happen. That process has to start before the first patent grants. And so you'll know what your grant date will be. It'll be like 3-4 weeks in the future. So you'll have 4 weeks to do that. Probably have a little bit more to do that because you should be starting that process with your patent attorney when it's allowed. Right? When you know the claims are allowed, you'll have about 4 months to, and your patent attorney hopefully will come to you and say, okay, listen, remember we drafted this application, there's like 6 inventions in there, or there's 6 different embodiments in there, or 6 features we want to go after. The examiner already cited that there were different inventions and we only have to pick one. There's that whole process. And so this is the time to file a continuation. And this is, by the way, we want you to do this, right? This only helps you. If you think about intellectual property being a fence around your property, a fence is only good if it's on all sides, right? And so one patent protects you on one side. So if you have a continuation from the same invention for a different feature, i.e. a different invention, and you can get a patent on that, well, that starts to build the fence around you. So it's a good thing. And so, yeah, you want, and don't get me wrong, not every patent has multiple inventions in it, but hopefully if you've worked out a good strategy with your patent attorney, you've thought of all the different versions that your product or technology can look like, and you're pursuing these other patents. And again, you won't have to, it won't be such a crazy examination process for that invention because it's really a feature of the first invention. And so I'm talking about the situation where after you have filed your application and potentially before your first official action on these 5 things, the examiner comes to you and says, hey, you know what? We actually think that your invention, your patent, has like 4 inventions in it. And so since we're a unitary patent system, you have to pick one. So I'm talking about that situation. Or I'm even talking about the situation where the examiner doesn't, he thinks that there's just one invention, but there's a way that there's a different way of looking at it, right? So maybe the first invention in your application was from like the user's perspective, like if you think of it like that, or maybe it was for like one feature of a particular product. And so the second feature may not be characterized by the patent office as a second invention, but we can draft the claims to have the patent office look at it as a second invention. So that's not such a bad thing either. Of course, we'll try to get it all into the first patent, into the first set of claims. But you know, claims are artfully drafted, and sometimes they're viewed by examiners not in the way that we have intended them, and thus they may think of it as different inventions. So this is the way to solve that. Anyway, that's the examination process. All of this takes about 3 years. You can speed it up within a year, called accelerated examination. So everything I just said in a full year. It costs a filing fee of about $1,000 if you're a micro entity, about $2,000 if you're a small entity, and $3,000 or $4,000. So $1,000, $2,000, $4,000, $4,000 if you're a large company. And so very popular in the world of technology. So a big part of the examination process is understanding your international strategy. So within that first, we'll just use the 3-year example, meaning it takes 3 years to examine. 1 year after your earliest filing, so remember, if your provisional is your earliest filing, at the exact same time as your non-provisional, you're going to have to think about your international strategy. If you just have a non-provisional, then 1 year after your non-provisional, so that would be about 6 months before your patent gets examined, your patent attorney will come to you and say, hey, remember, we filed a patent just in the United States. If you now want the ability to have your patent protected in another country, you have to start the international patent process. And the international patent process starts with a filing called the PCT. So in 1970, the Patent Cooperation Treaty was signed by 48 countries. There's now about 154 of them. And in there, they said that all of these countries will abide by the same patentability requirements. So they'll all look for novelty. They'll all look for obviousness. They'll all look for best mode and written description. And they'll also look for something called industrial applicability, where they're looking to see if your patent can actually support an industry in a particular country. And that will give an entrepreneur or a company a shortcut into getting into one of those 154 countries. And so during that process, you'll get something called an International Preliminary Examination Report that will basically tell you whether it's worth for you to go into one of the PCT countries based on novelty, obviousness, and industrial applicability. So the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is the world kind of NGO that created the PCT system, will do an examination of your claims, and they'll issue this International Preliminary Examination Report, and they'll say that, oh, your claims meet the test of novelty on this global scale. Or maybe they'll say it meets novelty, but your claims lack industrial applicability, or your claims lack obviousness. And then you as an entrepreneur, as a company, will then have the opportunity, about a year after that, to really think about whether you want to take that chance in another country. Right? Maybe the claims are not novel on a global scale, might be novel in the US, but maybe not in other countries. And so maybe you're either going to have to amend your application on the global scale, or maybe you're going to think about, maybe restarting the process with different claims because you want to get into the international process. Or maybe you'll take your chances. Maybe you'll go into that country knowing that your claims might be rejected for novelty, but maybe in China, if that's the country you go into, there'll be a process there, like there is a process in the United States, to amend the claims and argue for novelty. And so, the international process is supposed to be cost saving. It costs about $1,800 filing fee to get into the PCT. It is the only fee you will pay from an official perspective. So it definitely is a cost saving mechanism, because it will not only allow you to pay a one-time fee, but in about 2 years, when you actually go into it, when you actually choose to nationalize your your U.S. application or whatever your home country is into one of these international countries, into one of these 154 countries, you will know by then a few things. One, you'll know if you even have a market, right? If you're even doing well in the United States, right? If your patent is, standing up to, examination. And then two, you'll know from that report, that International Printer Examination report, you can hedge the bet, or you can take the risk into some of these countries. But make no mistake about it, if there are about 52 countries that are not part of the PCT, like Argentina and like some of the Middle East countries, that if you want to file in those countries, those also have to be filed within 1 year of your earliest filing date. So if you have a provisional, 1 year after your provisional, you have to file in those 52 countries, the PCT, and convert to a non-provisional. That's a lot. So when you're thinking about your strategy, think about this. Maybe the best thing to do is start with a non-provisional, right? Give yourself a year, and in a year you can file in one of the 52 countries or the PCT. Now, keep in mind that this is when I talk about like meeting these year dates and like filing within a year, that's all so that the application that you eventually file in China will have a priority date of your provisional, right? So that when it's examined by the Chinese Patent Office, that they are judging any inventions that happen after that have come before you, not after you. So the earliest you can make your filing date, the better in those countries, right? So again, hopefully your patent search would have uncovered. That's why it's so important to do a patent search on a global scale, right? So it's great to do it on Google, it's great to do it at the USPTO, but if you want international protection, it's very good to use a search firm, or to use a patent attorney that has the capability to search all 154 countries through the PCT. And it's part of the process, so it's not hard. Anyway, that's the PCT process. It's a pretty, it doesn't have, there isn't much to it other than taking your application, filing it within this process, getting this examination report, and making sure that your application is ready from an ownership perspective, from a claim perspective, is ready to then go into the national countries that make up one of the 154 PCT countries. If you don't choose to do that, if you go through the PCT process and at the end of it you don't go into one of those countries, the PCT is moot. It becomes worthless. It's like a pass-through. It doesn't give you protection internationally unless you file in one of those countries. And so keep in mind that if if the average cost in the United States is $10,000 for a patent, figure you're going to pay that much for any one of the countries that you file in. Most companies do not file in 154 countries, but they'll strategically file. So think about where your products will be made. Think about where you'll have infringers. Think about where you're going to be importing. Think about where you're going to be exporting. Think about where there's a particular industry for what you're trying to do. Maybe it's a water invention, and it's maybe you want to file in the African countries. And so this is the way to get into a lot of countries. So like when you think about Europe, and it's 28 countries that make it up. So the Europe would need to be filed off of the PCT as about a year and a half later or 2 years later after you have gone into the PCT. So let me lay it out for you. So if you have a provisional and you start the PCT a year later, you'll have 30 months from that earliest provisional to think about when then you have to file in the 154 countries. And the same thing, you have a non-provisional, 30 months later, you'll have to think about taking that PCT that you would have started within a year, 30 months from your non-provisional, you'll have to start the filing for one of the foreign countries. So, I just don't want you to think like, oh, I filed my international patent, I have international protection. No. It's a pass-through situation where once you get into the country that you want to file, you pay those filing fees, you go through that examination. It's like the PCT is like a preview of what will happen, and once you get the patent in that particular country, that's the protection that you have in that country. And again, it's the protection you get is to the access to the court system, that if you think that somebody's infringing you in China, if you have the Chinese patent, you can go into a China court and you can enforce your patent. So that's the PCT process. And you know, these are some questions that we noticed on the co-founder site over the last few months. I just kind of want to answer them because they kind of illuminate some of what we've been talking about over the last few sessions. So one of them is, you know, what if I see my product or idea on shelves or Shark Tank? I think you know by now there's really nothing you can do about that unless you have a patent application on file that you can prove that you have invented that which you see on the shelves or on Shark Tank before that person invented it, right? Your invention will, at the end of the day, your invention will be judged by its filing date, by the earliest filing date. And if it's to be judged by a public disclosure, then you have to make sure that that public disclosure was pretty limited, right? Because it'd be really, really hard to prove that you know, that someone heard your idea, you know, or that saw your idea on the internet and then ran to file a patent application, and that you know, theoretically invented before them. That's a really hard thing to prove. And so it's really hard. So if you see your idea on Shark Tank, I'm not saying you're dead in the water, but you probably need to take a quick trip to your patent attorney and say, hey, I had this idea. Here's the idea I saw. Here's my idea. Do I have any chance? First thing we're going to do a search to see if the person on Shark Tank or the product on the shelf is protected. A lot of the times it's not, right? A lot of the times people have not taken the affirmative step that they should have because they thought maybe somebody else did, or they didn't have any money, or whatever. So if you take the affirmative step and you're the first inventor to file, and you prove that you invented it first and did not see it from that person or on Shark Tank, or, you know, took it off the shelves and then decided to make claim your own, but you have an invention log or something that you can prove that you invented it first, then yeah, we should file a patent, get you some protection. Will you be able to stop the person on Shark Tank? No. But can you stop someone that comes after you? Yes. So can I sell my product if I only have a patent application? Of course. That's what we want you to do. If you think back to the obviousness example, we want you to be a commercial success. That should happen in about 2 years, right? So we want you to start selling as soon as possible. We don't want you to wait till you get a patent number. We want you to start selling as soon as it's safe to sell. And it's safe to sell and disclose what you're selling as soon as you have something on file. As soon as you have something on file, that is the end-all, be-all. That's your record. That's your line in the sand. Yes, there's a lot of steps after that. And yes, there's a lot of examination to occur, and a lot of, you know, patent and a lot of back and forth and arguing with the patent office and getting a patent. But your protection will be all of your protection, and any potential infringer that came after you, you'll be able to collect on profits that person made, dating all the way back from when you filed your application. So, you know, you have to. We want yes, we want you to start selling, and you know, the earliest date that we can get you protection, everything will be judged after that. Can I license my patent application? You know, this is the single, I think, the biggest thing that most entrepreneurs ask. You know, they, I think a lot of people, you know, look to want to try to license their, you know, ideas to big companies, or, you know, they know that they're the solution that Johnson & Johnson's looking for, or they're the feature, you know, that Google needs, or they can optimize a product in another way, and if we just had the application on file, well, that will be enough to prove that you know, they're the real deal, and that company should license with them. And you know what? That does happen, but it's become an anomaly, and but even if you don't believe it's an anomaly, and that's okay, what I want you to understand is you have to at least be ready as an entrepreneur to take the next step to further monetize your own invention so that you can get the licensing deal you want. More and more companies they're not satisfied with just the patent application. They want to see that you have a product. They want to see that you've commercialized it. They want to see that you proved the concept. They want to see that you built it. They want to see the sweat. They want to see the money. They want to see the first investor. They want to see all of that. They want to see you get the patent. They want to see at the end of the day, you survived an examination, you got the patent, they're not buying a lawsuit, they're not buying a potential litigation, nobody's going to claim infringement, and that's when they're going to license from you. And even then, they probably still want to see a product, right? They still want to see something to touch. They want to see a prototype. So as long as you have the open mind to take the next step at every milestone, then I think you'll be okay, right? But if you think that it's just going to happen just after filing, you know, I'm not so sure. If you think it's going to happen just after putting up a website, I'm not so sure. I mean, God, great if it does, but at least be prepared for all of this. And by the way, these are your babies, these are your inventions. You should want to try to see it through and see see if it works and see if it sells, and see if you can make it or how much it would cost. I think it will just help you become more licensable, right? Knowing what having a business plan that fully talks about how do you make it, where can I source it, where do I do it, where do I get the materials, price per unit. All of that is key. All of that is key to trying to, entice a license or, have someone be interested in you. Will an investor want to invest in my provisional or non-provisional? And so this is the same answer. Nowadays, an investor, whether they're an accredited investor or someone with high net worth, whether they're a social investor or just social impact investor, whether they're an investor that's associated with an incubator, an accelerator, or a private equity firm, or whatever, more and more of them are pretty savvy about patents. Some of them couldn't give a shit about patents, right? They don't care. But the ones that do, or even the ones that don't, they know enough that if you're going to come into their face with a provisional, they know enough that that is pretty weak protection, right? It's great, don't get me wrong. From our perspective, from patent attorney's perspective, it gives you that line in the sand because we know that you're going to, convert it to a non-provisional, and that's going to be examined. But when you go to an investor with a provisional, they know there's a lot left to happen, right? That the provisional that you presented to them, hopefully it's a pretty well thought out provisional, it has claims in it and everything like that, but they know that it could change. Right? They know that over the next year, when you're trying to get further investment or do further research or whatever, they know that it could change. And even with a non-provisional, they know that those claims have yet to be examined. Or even if they've been examined, they know that they might be changed. Right? Okay, so they saw your search, so they know that you're novel, but they want the patent office to stamp you novel. And so I think it's really, more and more I see investors not want to invest in, or not want to license or invest in provisionals, and even non-provisionals. More and more I see it. More and more I tell entrepreneurs, if you are the type of entrepreneur that can like transcend your patent filing or transcend your idea, and you just blow them out of the park with your personality, I think you have a better chance getting investment in that perspective than than just relying on your patent. Like I think you just have to think of the non-provisional and the provisional as tools, that you have in your box to get you to a further place. That being either the prototype stage or for sale or whatever. But I don't think anymore it's the end-all be-all having a provisional or non-provisional. I think it's an important part to the process, but more and more I think it's more about the entrepreneur and their execution plan, right? So not just about having on paper that you have a great idea, but how are you going to execute? And I think I'm preaching to the choir. I think you all know this to some extent, but with that being said, it is still, no matter which way you cut it, if you want to, have your company that you eventually will start, the thing that will add the most value to your company will be the patent. And so the investment may come to you because you're a phenomenal entrepreneur, but that may add value to who you are, that may add value to your person, but to your company, it doesn't. Right? What adds value to company is their intellectual property, is their patents, is their trademarks or copyrights. And so most of the time, even the investors that say, oh, we don't give a shit about patents, sooner or later, once they're invested in and fully vested in a particular venture, that's when the talk about intellectual property starts. That's when they start to really, say, hey, you know what? Okay, we've invested in you, or this company, and now we have to start producing something, and we have to start protecting that something, or we have to protect our name or whatever. So I always find that I always have kind of cornered investors who have been vocally against. Oh, well, I'm going to invest in a really great idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be patents. More and more, those exact people, years later, when confronted, or even days later when confronted, are usually, if you look at their top 10, portfolio companies, there's intellectual property, whichever way you cut it, patents, trademarks. But I think they say that and they do that the patents are important because they want to, because I think they want to drive home the message that there's so much more to the journey than just the intellectual property. There's the entrepreneur themselves and the way that they execute. Anyway, that's that. So so you have a registered patent. Now what happens? So we talked about a lot of this. You can a patent is a piece of property. What could you do with property? You can sell it. You can take it to a patent broker, for an all-out sale. So if you spend $10,000 on it, maybe you can make $25,000 on it. So pay for the cost of the patent and then some. No residual rights. You just outright sell it through a patent broker. Of course, the holy grail that we all want is licensing. If you can get a company to license either the manufacturing of it, the production of it, the design of it, the sale of it, something, that's great. And usually the reason why licensing is such a big issue is if you look at any standard license, there's an intellectual property clause that says we're going to license your product from you, but basically you're warranting and representing that which you are allowing us to sell on your behalf, or that we're going to handle for you on your behalf, has been fully examined and is protected, and that if somebody accuses you of infringement, well, we're not involved. Right? You have to indemnify us for any losses that we should incur as a result of being your licensee or something like that. So it's really important to the intellectual property becomes such an important part of a lot of these agreements, of these license agreements, that in order for you to make those types of representations and warranties, it's really good to have the patent, trademark, and copyright, because basically by getting it, you're gaining the presumption of validity, right? You have met your burden of proving to the patent office that your idea is novel, and as a result, you have this presumption that if somebody infringes you, you don't have to prove that they're infringing you; they have to prove that they're not, and that's a huge thing. And licensees, people that are licensing from you, love that because they know that they're not buying a litigation. Right, or if they're potentially being accused of someone's going to accuse your product of infringement, they know that you've already met your burden, and the other party has to prove that they're infringing you, not vice versa. So really, really important. And then other ways to monetize. So many times after one of our clients get a patent, they'll come to us and say, okay, David, these are the top 10 products that we believe are infringing our patent. Right, we found them on the internet. And so one of the things that we do is we'll send out what we call a demand letter. So it's like a cease and desist letter saying, okay, we went through the patent part. Here's our patent. Here's our claims. X company, we're sending you a letter. We're letting you know that we have evidence that your product overlaps. We hate to use the word infringe at this point, but that's really what we're saying. It overlaps with my client's patented claims. And so we are requesting that you negotiate a license with us. We put it in the best possible terms because at the end of the day, we don't want to put that person out of business. We want them to continue selling. We just want them to pay my client a royalty or some lump sum to monetize them. And this is a real entrepreneurial way to monetize your inventions. And remember, when you got into the patent field, we always want you to be comfortable with this. I want you to be comfortable with like reaching out to other entrepreneurs, or maybe small companies, or maybe even big companies, and be ready for the fight, right? Be ready for the the peaceful negotiation, but ready for the response that says, F you, bring a lawsuit, we're not paying anything. But if you have a good patent attorney, and they could, negotiate a deal to avoid litigation, because nobody wants to spend $1 million to bring or defend a patent infringement suit. That's kind of where you want to be. And so, there are firms like us do also handle that because it's part of the monetization. But there are also, patent monetization firms that do this. Or just, some of them are law firms, some of them work with lawyers, but that's what they're doing. They are taking on your patent, and they are, sending out letters and demand letters, sometimes nasty ones, sometimes, not, sometimes in like unscrupulous ways, sometimes in perfectly reasonable ways. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you money, right? They're trying to monetize your patent. Because at the end of the day, this was one of the tools to get you. I want you to be open that this is one of the ways that you can monetize. Sometimes it's directly selling, right? Sometimes it's manufacturing your product and finding your supply chain, and selling it on eBay or selling it on Amazon, or being having authorized sellers and dealers and retailers, and sometimes it's licensing. But this is another way, and it's a real popular way for sure, And if you as an entrepreneur, clearly if you as an entrepreneur are already engaged in that business, you're already making this widget, you already have this solution, but you also believe that somebody else might be infringing you, then that provides so much more credit and a trustworthiness when you're going to approach someone that might be infringing you. Right? Because if you were not, let's say you were the situation where you got the patent, you never made the product, or maybe you proved the concept, but you didn't never sell it. You have your patent, and now you want to start monetizing it this way. Then clearly you might be considered what we call a non-practicing entity, because you're not practicing, you're not selling it. That's where the concept of being a patent troll comes in. And so if a company gets a letter from like you, and they look you up and they realize, who is this person? Who is this company? They don't make anything, they don't do anything, they have a patent, they're not practicing it. What do they know from it? What do they know from the industry? And now they're telling me that I have to pay them a royalty. And so I'm not, believe me, that happens all the time, and we have clients like that, and it's a reality. But so much better if you can like be engaged in the process and sell it, because then when we reach out to them, they can say that, right? And they can say, oh, you know what, this is somebody that's trying to do this, and this is an entrepreneur, and they're trying to, make it here, and we can strategically partner with them if that's the way they want to look at it, or we can be a licensee of them, and we can avoid litigation, and I think that's just a much better way to do it, I think, in the long run. Anyway, those are the ways that you can monetize your patent, and clearly infringement. I mean, that is, the intellectual property is what we call the power of exclusion. So if you get an intellectual property right, whether it's a patent, trademark, or copyright, you have the ability to stop someone from infringing. If you have the knowledge that somebody might even be helping someone infringe, then they also could potentially be notified or demanded to infringement. Infringement costs a lot of money to prove. I think the average is $1 million to bring it and defend it. Nobody wants to go to court. This is court, right? So sometimes what we do is we use these other methods, but really what we're trying to say is, we believe that you're really infringing us, and we have the might and the power, or maybe the resources to bring an infringement litigation, but we don't want to do that, and so let's not go down that route, and let's take one of these routes, right, instead. But infringement is, a serious offense. It could be intentional, it could be contributory, it could be knowingly, like, somebody could, knowingly induce somebody else to infringe, and that person might be liable. So you can be liable even if you didn't know there was a patent. Like the famous last words, I didn't know I was infringing a patent. Well, no, that's not that. Your intent matters when it comes to the damages you're going to pay. But all I have to prove, I don't really have to prove anything. All I have to prove is I have my patent, which I've already proved because I have a patent, and I have to just claim that you're infringing me. You have to prove that you're not. And if I then prove, if in a court of law you couldn't prove that you infringed, that you did not, that you couldn't prove that you didn't infringe me, then what I'm going to focus what me as the patent holder is going to focus on is whether you knowingly did this, whether you intentionally did this, whether the court's going to punish you for this. So, and that will go into the damages and stuff like that. So, yeah, and if you remember, you get the entire United States border. So if you file your patent with U.S. Customs Board, they will look out for you to see if somebody's importing an infringing object. So you get to stop someone from selling. Infringement can be done by either selling a product or offering to sell a product or making the product that you've described or importing the product you described. And it has to, and again, it has to fall within those claims, right? It's all about the claims. It's not that, oh, that product is described in my specification, or that product it matches one of my drawings in my utility patent. It's the product the product that I think is infringing me has been described in my patent claims, or the patent of that corresponding product. Remember, because they could have gotten a patent on one feature and you kind of got patents on another feature, that the patent is infringing my patent. The one patent's infringing another patent. And so if you remember from the first class, like the patent office sometimes does this. Sometimes they will, patent thousands of patents, each with its own, feature on any one technology, and it's up to the courts to define what the patent really means in relation to the suspected or alleged infringer and their patent. And at the end of that, adversarial fight, one of those patents will likely be declared invalid, and one of those patents will likely be declared the winner. And so, you just want to avoid this type of situation altogether. Sometimes we say these are good problems to have because if you're at a level where people are infringing you, you're likely at a level of success too. But if you're at a level of success, then you're likely at a level where you have to have a budget to, defend or bring an infringement suit. Anyway, that is everything that we've covered the gamut of, getting a patent, how you get it, how you protect your idea, what the examination process is, and I want to know if there are any questions. And again, we may not be able to get to all the questions. I will stick around for as long as I can, I think till around 4, but you have my email. It's on this slide, so you can send me any questions. But Kasha will see if there's any questions that came in.
All right, let's see questions from today's session. First question. Can a parent patent application become prior art against a later filed child continuation in part application when both the parent and child CIP applications belong to the same inventor, applicant, or assignee?
No, the patent office is much smarter than that, right? There is something called common ownership, right? So if you are the same inventor of the child and the parent, the patent office will just say, show me that, right? So there's something called a terminal disclaimer, where you're basically saying to the patent office, well, I filed this child. You would think they would know this, right? But everything needs a form. I filed this child, and so the patent that you cited against me was really the parent. Patent examiners usually know this, but in case they don't see it or they didn't put 2 and 2 together, yes, you would file a statement of common ownership, it's called, saying that you own it, and so it can't be cited as art against you.
Great, thank you, David. Next question. I did a search on a patent where the application date was 7 years ago, but no evidence that this patent application was approved or reviewed since the application date. Is this delay normal?
Wow, 7 years is a long time. I can tell you in the world of old software applications, the delay is normal. In some biotech, I don't know what field it is. In some biotech, it's kind of normal, but 7 years is a long time. I can tell you this, that when that patent actually gets examined and approved, if the delay was as a result of the patent office backlog, which is clearly we have, not 7 years, but clearly we have, then all of that time will be added on to your 20-year term. So yes, it's disastrous to go through a 7-year term, but it will add it on. Another thing, if you as a patent attorney have to appeal a decision of an examiner who you believe is actually applying the wrong law or not understanding the invention and, you know, being so kind of like, you know, not being so resistant to your arguments, and if you want to appeal and call into question his findings by his supervisors, you can start the appeal process. The current time for appeal in America is 5 years. And so nobody wants to go to appeal. So if you ever lose a rejection, remember you'll have 2 chances to do that. If you ever lose a rejection, to really have a hard talk with your patent attorney, because if you believe that the examiner should be appealed, then you have to, you know, close your eyes and go to sleep for 5 years, because nothing. It's really hard to get. It takes a long time to get an appeal. That could be the 7 years, but it might be a better option to restart. Restart prosecution, to buy another 2 turns. Remember, you get 2 bites of the apple. So pay another filing fee, draft new claims that are supported by the spec, and then get another 2 tries at it. That's a much better option. We call that a request for continued examination, an RCE. If you can do that, that's a much better and shorter option than the appeal. Going down the appeal is like disaster. It's like 5 years. So yes, 7 years is normal. Is a normal examination period when faced with potential appeal or particular, you know, contentious issue from, you know, days old. You know.
Thank you, David. Next question: for a product development company, hardware and software, what is the correct stage to apply for a patent, assuming the following phases of product development? 1, feasibility study. 2, alpha prototype, Rev 01. 3, beta prototype. And 4, minimum viable prototype.
Yeah, right. Minimum viable products. You know, the safest way to do this is to do it from the beginning, from just, you know, theoretical idea. Or I think your first one was feasibility, right? If you can do it from there, because every other one of those stages can be theoretically described in your initial disclosure and thus invented, right? Thus have an invention date. So if you wait already to MVP or beta, that means that people will have seen it, they may not be under NDA, your clock for filing a patent will have started, that may be a year, and so you open yourself up to all those potential risks of someone filing before you. So the earliest you can do it, the better. Even if that means like provisional 1 on feasibility, 2 months later, provisional 2 on, you know, MVP, 3 months later, you know, it doesn't happen this fast, but as an example, provisional 3 on beta. And then 1 year from that provisional 1, combining all 3 of those into a strategic non-provisional filing to incorporate all those. That's one other way I would do it.
Thank you. Next question goes back to the example you gave earlier. Isn't a combination of 3 other patents, that is windmill, turbine, and pipe, in a new invention considered a new use for those patents, thus not be rejected for obviousness?
Yeah, so finding a new, so here's the thing. If we would have gotten a novelty rejection, right? We didn't, we got an obviousness rejection. The examiner knew it was novel. He agreed with you, right? He believed that we were finding new uses for things. But what he believed was, that was fine, so no novelty, no need to argue that. His problem was, okay, I think you found new uses for things, but that those things, if those three inventions were put together, they would be obvious. It's as if the three inventors would talk to each other and they would say, oh, you know what, if we put this and this together, that would be yours. And so, as you can see, there's a little bit of an overlap here. That's because a lot of obviousness comes from novelty, and so we did use that. Like we did say, like as part of our commercial success argument, which won, we said, hey, we were the first to put this together, right? We were the first to put these together, but we also had commercial success. Unfortunately, it wouldn't have been enough if we just say we were the first to put them together, right? That's, I mean, it would have been enough if we got the novelty rejection, but because we got the obviousness rejection, it's like the condition for the next phase of it, which is commercial success or long-felt need, or, you know, teaching a new field of endeavor. So, but good observation.
Thank you, David. Next question. When is it advantageous to file a non-provisional with a non-publication request?
Sorry, it's a good question. So a non-publication request, remember, after you file a non-provisional, your application will be secret until 18 months when it's published and assigned to an examiner. What this person is asking is if there's something called a non-publication request where you actually don't allow the patent office, you don't allow the public to ever see it. And so I'm not a big fan of these things, and so if you have a non-pub request, you basically tell the patent office, do not publish my application. and they won't. And it will be signed to an examiner, and everything will be kept secret until it's patented. I'm not a big fan of that because when you file a non-pub request, that will not give you the license to file in a foreign country. And so remember, you have your non-provisional, you file your non-pub request. 1 year later, you have to file the international aspects of it. So if you plan to file international and you have a non-pub request, you're gonna have to withdraw the non-pub request, which will then, you know, defeat the whole purpose of the non-pub request, right? Because it will then become public. You can't go back to it not being public in order to file internationally, and then it will be published in due course. And so I guess the answer to your question, I kind of answered it, which is if you have no intention to file internationally, then filing an application with a non-pub request is probably something I would do. But if you want to file internationally, then you should not have the non-pub request because it won't give you the license to foreign file.
Thank you. Next question is, to get around patent obviousness, you mentioned the oilman should sell the product in the industry, but then hasn't he disclosed the idea and therefore it is no longer patentable? Or does he have to do this after the rejection to prove it is able to get commercial success?
So you're fundamentally, whoever asked that, you're fundamentally misunderstanding. Remember, examination only happens after you filed an application. If you filed an application, then I don't care if it's public, right? It's okay if it's public. Doesn't matter if it's public anymore, right? Because you have your invention date. So it doesn't. The question, you know, functionally doesn't work, right? It doesn't matter that it's public anymore, that you're selling it, because you are allowed to. We want you to because you've already filed. You already have your line in the sand. You already have your invention date. It's okay that you are publicly making it available for sale. Okay?
Thank you. Next question. If a PCT application is derived from a provisional but leaves out some subject matter, will that subject matter become prior art when the PCT is published? In other words, does the provisional become public and is published with the PCT?
Yeah, so that's a good question, but I wanna make a big correction there. When you file your provisional application and a year later you go to convert it to either a non-provisional or you take that provisional and you file a PCT, you don't leave out anything, right? The whole point is that that provisional has been filed and drafted so well that when you convert it to a non-provisional, you're not adding anything, because then that would be the new invention date, but that even when you're going to your PCT stage, you're not leaving anything out. There's no amending it. you can if you want to, but what's the purpose, right? The whole purpose is that everything is in there in order to get to the international stage, because then the international authorities are going to examine it the way they would your non-provisional. That if you would have chosen to file the non-provisional, you don't have to. You can just file the PCT and then come into America later. But the whole point is there's no leaving out anything. There's no amending. If anything, you're going to add to it, right? And hopefully you're adding to your PCT because maybe it's to further define something that you've already disclosed in your provisional. But no, you would not add any. You would not take away anything to it. And again, just to follow the end of that, your provisional would not be prior art to your PCT because it connects. It's all connected, right? If you follow these year dates, they're all connected to each other. And so, yeah, no, I just don't like. Whoever asked that, don't think about taking anything out like that. Like we never take anything out. If anything, we're adding. We're not taking anything out.
Thank you, David. A question from Stacy. If you do a patent search and you see a patent or a submission which is similar to yours, should you reference it or use it in your application?
Excellent question. We are the only country, Stacy, in the entire world that has something called the duty of disclosure, that every single patent applicant through their patent attorney has the duty to disclose anything that they are aware of, that they know, that they searched, that might be material to their patentability. So when we do a search, we not only include the search results in our patent application as a way to tell the story to the patent examiner that we are novel, but within 3 months of our filing, we file something called an information disclosure statement, where we tell the examiner, hey, this is everything we found. These are articles, these are non-patent literature, these are studies, these are the patent search examples that we found that maybe we didn't choose to tell you about, everything. And that's a good thing. It's a little bit of an annoying thing that we're the only country that does it, but it's a good thing because, again, if anybody in the future says, well, you knew about something and you didn't tell the patent office. So we never have that situation in America. Everything we know about, we tell the patent office. And so, as you can imagine, it's the flip. If you've known about something and you didn't tell your patent attorney about it, and we didn't cite it through an information disclosure statement, then that would be grounds for invalidation, right? That would be grounds for the patent office to say, you had a duty, right? You had an applicant's duty to disclose, you had an inventor's duty to disclose, and you didn't tell us about it. And so when we examined your patent, we didn't have all the information and invalid. And so we disclose everything. So usually I have to keep clients under control. They'll come to me and say, oh, I just did a search on my own and I found 20 products. Oh God, we're like, oh no, like don't do that. Let us do the search because now whatever you found, we have to disclose. And so yeah, we're the only country that does that.
Thank you, David. Next question is from Warren. Does it make sense to do a patent search before development and design to ensure that you are not infringing?
So remember, we are doing a patent search when we're looking for novelty and obviousness. We're not looking for infringement. If you want to do an infringement analysis, that's called a freedom to operate search. That is, we're actually identifying patents. Again, we're measuring them against your claims that you've already filed. So that's something that would happen like later on down the road. Or if you come to us and say, I want to enter into Canada. Okay, so let's take your patent claims. Let's compare them against all Canadian patents in this field, and let's see if there's an infringement, right? That's a freedom to operate search. When we do a novelty and obviousness search, or patent search, like the homework was, that's we're looking for novelty and obviousness. We're looking to see if there are things that the patent office can piece together to form obviousness and obviousness rejection, and we're also looking to see if your patent I use the word overlap because I don't want to make it sound like infringement, but we're looking to see if your application has, if your ideas or your inventions, we don't have your claims yet because it's just an idea, if they've already been described in some manner under different patents. And, whether somebody's already figured out, whether somebody's discovered it or improved it or found a new use for something. And so it's, as you can see, they're like somewhat similar, but the way we do it is very different. One happens before an application is filed. One happens, infringement happens after we know what your protection is, what your patent is, what your claims are. So very, very different standards. And by the way, infringement is judged by a court. The patent office is not looking for infringement. They're looking for those 5 things that we talked about. They're not looking for infringement. They would never issue a rejection saying, we believe your patent is infringing someone else. That's for one inventor, one entrepreneur to accuse another entrepreneur of in a court of law or through one of these letters that we talked about.
Thank you, David. I think we've gone through the questions from today's sessions. There were a couple repeat questions. So if you would like to, if you still have a couple minutes and would like to maybe go through the questions from the last session, whatever we didn't answer.
Right, and some of you are here. The best thing is, so is Lyft infringing on Uber? I get this all the time from my students where I teach. Let's just say, I don't know if they're, I've read Uber patents. I don't know if Lyft have patents, but I will say this. In the world of the sharing economy as it pertains to transportation, we will, make no mistake about it, see a battle of patents here. And if we don't see one, it's likely because Uber has, you know, sent a letter to Lyft and they've worked something out that we'll never know about. But in any one technology, and even smartphones, we see battles now that on patents that are like 6 or 7 years old. We won't see it for a while. But yeah, I do believe there's a battle coming with Lyft and Uber and all the other taxi cabs. How much does an NDA cost? I think I told you all. Like, I have a standard NDA. Just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Some of you have asked for it already. I'd be happy to give it. Again, it's an important document to use because it's not just about protecting your disclosure, but not starting the 1-year clock if it's public. So let me know. Typically, an NDA can go anywhere from like $750 to $1,500 if it's going to be like negotiated between parties. It's in that price. Don't pay more than that. What's the difference between filing fee, provisional, and non-provisional? That's all public. Go to uspto.gov. Go to filing fees. A provisional is $65. A non-provisional is $400. Conceivably, one might have to file both a utility and a design patent for a new product like Nest, without a doubt. Most new products have all 4. Four types of four versions of intellectual property, right? Design patent, utility patent, trademark, and copyright. They all, most new products will satisfy all of those. So I'm creating an MVP to test this innovative idea in the form of a website and adjusting things. Do I apply for a patent after I test the MVP and make adjustments, or before I put it out there for the world to see? I think all of you by now could answer that. File the patent first before you let anyone see it. Can you explain more about the 1-year grace period? So if you remember, if you publicly disclose something for 1 year, meaning you've made disclosures that are not under a non-disclosure agreement, the patent office will give you 1 year to claim invention from that date that you disclosed. So let's say at the dinner table tomorrow, you disclose your idea to 6 of your parents' closest high net worth friends. And tomorrow is May 24th. And you didn't file a patent. You're not asking them to sign NDAs. But on May 24th, 2017, at the dinner table tomorrow, you're going to disclose your idea. You will have till May 24th, 2018 to file a patent on that, and your invention date will be May 23rd, 2017, 1 year, right? You get a 1 year grace period, but you only get that 1 year grace period if you've actually filed an application within 1 year. If you file it on June 1st, 2018, you lose that year. And so it's a grace period, because it used to be, we lived in a system where you can invent something and file a patent years from now. As long as you can prove that you invented it 10 years ago, but only filed your patent application, years later, It used to be that your invention date could be one thing and your filing date could be another. That's not how it is anymore. It's now the first inventor to file their application. But in that scenario, if any one of those 6 people tells a friend, or let's say they each tell a friend, and one of those friends files a patent application on 4 days after your disclosure at the dinner table, it would be so hard to prove that that happened, right? First of all, you wouldn't know if that person had a patent application until 2 years from then. At that point, you would have, let's say, filed by May 24th, 2018, and so their application would be cited against you, right? Because then you wouldn't be novel. That application came first, and then you would have to look at it and say, hey, that's one of the friends of one of the 6 people that were at my mom's house on May 23rd, 2017. Like, that's like crazy. Like, if you can prove it, great. But to avoid that situation, and by the way, if you can prove it, then their patent would be invalidated because they didn't really invent it. They heard it from you, and the law doesn't protect the thief; it protects the inventor. But not having to even deal with that. Let's say you don't want to even deal with that. Get them all to sign NDAs. Then there's no public disclosure. There's no 1-year grace period, and then you can file whenever you want to file.
Actually, we have a question from Warren, who is on the line right now, and he's asking, should I provide a list of competitors as additional reference for the patent search and process? Yeah, so part of, like, I can tell you that part of our, like, when somebody asks us to file a patent search, we ask them 4 questions. It's like our checklist, and one of the questions we asked is what do you know now? Who are your biggest competitors? Because if we have that information, we can include it in our search, right? We can find out if your competitors with those competing products have patents. If they don't, great, you probably beat them to it. But maybe they have a patent and it's not public yet. But yes, that's Warren. That is definitely part of the search process. I think, last one. If I file a patent on an electronic circuit, can I just submit a block diagram on how it works? Or do I have to include all the components, the resistors, capacitors, and transistors? And do I have to include the actual values of each component? So this is from Scott, and I'll say to all of you, this is why we have the written description requirements, right? If you didn't include the resistors, the capacitors, and transistors, when the electrical engineer, who is a patent examiner, is reading your patent, he may say, you can't assume that he's going to understand, or even assume, oh yeah, that can only work with transistors, capacitors, and capacitors. What he likely will say, if that can only work with resistors, capacitors, transistors, then you have to include those as best mode, as enablement, as part of written description, so that the world understands. Forget him. He's doing this on behalf of the innovation world, right? That they understand that in order to build this product, you have to have these, what you, Scott, might consider obvious things, obvious components. And do you have to include actual values? Yeah, without a doubt. If you want your protection to be a particular value, then yes. But yes, a block diagram would work. Labeling all the components is great. If you look at previous patents, you'll see like some of them are really detailed, a lot of pieces and diagrams, stuff like that. That's great. And again, it all goes back to having the blueprint to judge infringement on. Anyway, that is it. If I didn't, I think I answered everything, but if I didn't, let me know. It was a pleasure to come before you. Hopefully you'll come out and hear the trademark and copyright webinar. We'd love to hear your feedback on how this went. And Kasia, any closing remarks? Just, David, I wanted to thank you for sharing your great knowledge with us, and you've been really fantastic here. And I want to thank you, everybody, for joining our webinars and asking questions. And I really hope that you got that it was this course was useful. If you still have any questions, like David said, you can reach out to him directly. The email will be, David's email will be included in the follow-up email with the link to all the recordings, so you'll have this for your reference. And you know, we hope to see you at our future webinars and courses. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Kasia. Talk to you soon.
Bye, David.
Bye.